All right, welcome to the Podcast Engineering Show. My name is Chris Curran, and I produce podcasts for big companies and authors and speakers and stuff. And I also teach at the Podcast Engineering School. That's my school where I teach the hardcore audio engineering aspects of podcast production. And every other week on the show, I do a guest interview. And then in between weeks, which is what you're hearing right now, it's an in-between week, I basically talk about the daily goodies that I've been blogging about on the website. So these episodes are kind of like a roundup summary of 10 or 12 daily goodies that I've blogged about over the past few weeks or so. Little tidbits of good information. That's what the Daily Goody is. You can actually subscribe by email as well, and you can receive emails every day or a weekly summary. And they're really cool in terms of they're short and sweet, and so don't expect too much. Some people expect a book every day, and that doesn't happen, as you know. So anyway, check out, if you want to hear some really awesome interviews with people, check out the previous episodes of this show. A couple announcements before I start overviewing these daily goodies. One, if you can help me out, I would greatly appreciate it. I want to reach some younger folks who might be interested in my podcast engineering school. So, for instance, 18 to 25-year-olds who might want to produce podcasts and earn really good money doing it. So a lot of these younger folks, instead of working at Starbucks for $8 an hour, you can edit podcasts and probably get like $20 or $30 an hour. Anyway, if you know of anyone of that age who's into audio or music, maybe they're in a band and they want to earn some extra money, maybe just tell them about Podcast Engineering School. Just to let them know it exists. Don't try to sell them and don't try to force them and all that. I think people just need to know that it exists. And then the people who want to attend the school will find it and attend. So Podfest was, about a week and a half ago now, and it was awesome. Podfest 2019 in Orlando. And I must say, these events are so special. If you want to grow a podcasting business, or even if you want to grow your presence in the podcasting industry, events like these are invaluable. I mean, the people you meet, you get to spend time with people face to face. I just saw something on Facebook. I think Carrie Green may have posted it. One conversation with someone in person is equivalent to 32 or 35 emails back and forth or something. And even then, it's not equivalent, right? Face-to-face, there's something to be said about it. So Podfest was really awesome. Podcast Engineering School starts April 16th, so that's when it starts. And also, I've been doing really good about recording guest interviews in advance. And I literally have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 7 in the can right now. So Colin Gray, Emily Prokop, Carrie Caulfield, Glenn Hebert, Glenn the Geek, Shawn Kitchen, Nick Dunkerley, and Evo Terra. They're all coming up on this show. Can you believe that? All right, well, the Daily Goody, I'm going to start just going over the Daily Goodies now. I'll probably go over 10 or 12, like I said. And if you have any questions about any particular goodie that I discuss, feel free to comment on the post on the website. So, each of these is a blog post, and you can easily comment on it and ask questions, and I can reply, and other people can reply and all that. So let's do it. February 14th. Not only was it Valentine's Day, it was the day that I put up a Daily Goody about how to minimize the on-off switch noise on an ATR 2100 and a Q2U. Both these mics are great USB microphones, and they're also XLR, and they have a switch on them, so you can turn them off and on. The problem is that switch, when you flick it, it creates an audible loud noise. So one thing you can do to minimize that loud noise, because I know some of you, or some people, when they're recording a podcast, maybe they have to cough, so they want to turn off the mic, for 10 seconds to cough and then turn it back on. Well, one thing you can do to minimize the noise of that switch is to, and it's not so easy, but it's not that hard either. When you put the switch on or off, do it really, really slowly. Like, instead of just flicking it on or off, like, move it really slowly. And what happens is when you move that switch really slowly, you'll switch it off or on, but it won't make that big noise. So that's kind of like, I don't know. It's just a good trick to use, especially if you're live streaming anything, because then, if you're recording something and you're going to do post-production later, then it's not such a big deal. You'll see this big spike in the wave and you can just remove that. But if you're live, or if you don't want to, risk missing that edit later, then you can just move that switch really slowly and it won't make any noise. All right, next one. Mixing two voices when one is fat and the other is thin. Yeah. So let's say you have a host and a guest, and let's say the host's voice sounds pretty good, because usually the host's voice sounds pretty good. So let's say, sometimes it's opposite, right? But let's say one person's voice has a lot of low end and it's really big and fat and, just big. And then the other person has almost no low end. And so they sound really thin and it almost sounds like they're on the phone. Well, when you're mixing those two voices when you're balancing them to make them the same volume, right? If there's that much discrepancy in the frequencies, it can be hard to balance them. Because perceptually it's just weird. If you ever want to try it, you can do it. Just you can even take any two voices and add a lot of low end to one voice and take out a lot of low end of the other, and then try to balance them. The volumes, adjust the volumes until they sound even to you. And it's not so easy. And it's one of those things where you can kind of keep going back and forth in the mix and being like, oh, I got to turn up that voice. And then you turn it up and, oh, that might be too much. So it's actually not easy to do if one voice is really fat and the other is really thin. And then that's why, to avoid that, you should sort of even them out, right? If someone has way too much low end, we'll take out some. And if someone doesn't have enough low end, well, put some in there. So you can, and that makes the volume of the voices easier to level as well. All right, next one, content edits versus audio edits. Well, real quick, I'm going to describe this really quickly, but there are a bunch of details to this. So when I work with clients and they record podcast episodes, I do a lot of audio editing. And when I say audio editing, I mean taking out any noises. If there's a big space with nothing there, I'll tighten up the space. Taking out ums and lip smacks and stuff like that, right? To me, those are audio edits. Content edits are different. Those are edits where you might take out a whole question and a whole answer because you didn't, maybe the host didn't, maybe the question wasn't great and then the answer wasn't great. And so you can just remove a whole question and the answer, and that makes the podcast better. But that's a content edit. And content edits in my business need to be made by the host or the producer. Me as an engineer, I'm never going to make a content edit until my client tells me to do it. So I'll make audio edits all day. I'll tighten it up. I'll make it sound good. But content edits, as far as cutting out questions and all that, no, I don't do that. My client has to tell me to do it. Okay, next. Why use a mastering step in podcast production? Well, the mastering step is like the final step of like adding a little bit more compression and EQ and limiting maybe. And it just sort of tightens up the whole mix and gets it ready for the listener, And the other thing in the mastering step, you can fix little mistakes too. Like if one person's voice is louder than the other, if you use more compression in the mastering step, it'll sort of even them out. So the mastering step is really, I think, important, and it doesn't have to be complicated either, but it really does make a difference. Of course, in podcast engineering school, we talk a lot about the mastering step. Okay, next one. Podcast editors charging per episode versus charging per hour. So if you're going to be working on podcasts for someone, do you tell them, oh, it's going to be $100 an episode? Or do you tell them it's going to be, $50 an hour? So in my experience, clients like it a lot better when you charge them per episode. And then, however long it takes you to do that episode or, produce that episode, that's up to you. So, but because with the client, if the client knows what it's going to cost per episode, then they know that it's a fixed number and they can budget for that and they can agree to that. Instead of, if they're agreeing for a per hour rate, let's say one episode takes you, way longer to produce. And then you say, okay, this episode's going to cost you $700. And they're going to be like, what? So charging per episode is usually better for everyone. And so that means you as an editor or a producer, you need to know how long things take, right? Anyway, that's your job to charge properly. Okay, the next one, having a podcast studio, physical versus virtual. Okay, so I had a physical studio in New Jersey, a podcast studio from 2012 to 2015, and it was great. I had a bunch of local business people come in and record episodes, and they could bring in guests, and it was great. But then I moved to Colorado, and that's when I decided to run my sessions virtually. So now I do them virtually. I meet with my clients on Zencastr or Squadcast, and we record sessions that way. It's great. So anyway, that's the difference. Obviously, virtual is easier for everyone, but having a physical space is awesome. Every now and then you'll see the news where, oh, there's a new podcast studio in Boston or New York or something, and usually they're sponsored by and paid for by big companies, right, that have a bunch of money. So that wasn't my experience. When I did it, it was just me as a local business person trying to make it work, and it wasn't easy. But it was a great experience for me, obviously. Okay, next one from February 20th. Types of audio signal levels. All right, there's different types of levels of signal levels of audio. Or different signal types. And what I mean is there's a microphone level. So, each microphone outputs a level, and that's we call that microphone level, and that needs to be boosted with a preamp, right? So that's what you do. You take the microphone level signal and you boost it up with a preamp, and now it's called line level. And line level is sort of like the standard level that signals travel, that audio travels like through mixers and through any really audio gear at line level. So the first thing you do with a microphone is you boost it up to line level, and then that's how you record it. That's how it goes through mixers and all that. And the other two aren't as important for podcasting, but there's instrument level, so which is the level coming out of a guitar, like an electric guitar, like. That also is sort of like microphone level. It needs to be boosted with a preamp. And then the other one is speaker level. Now, speaker level is much stronger than all the others. So speaker level is like after the sound has been amplified and it's being sent to a speaker. Because a physical speaker needs really a lot of energy to move the speaker, to push out the cone and to move the tweeter and the woofer. So, when an audio signal comes out of an amplifier, it's very much louder than line level because it needs to drive the speakers. So that's speaker level. That's what we call that. So those are just a few different types of level that are good to know. All right, the next one, the diaphragm of a microphone. This one's easy. Inside every mic, there's a little diaphragm, which is the actual, it's usually like a thin piece of metal, really thin, actually. And the sound waves vibrate the diaphragm, and then there's electrical wires connected to the diaphragm, which when the diaphragm vibrates from the air, it creates the electrical signal that comes off of the diaphragm. So that's how the sound waves are converted into an electrical signal, is by the diaphragm. All right, the next day was my episode with Brian Ensminger, which was a great one. We talked a lot about Hindenburg and also just his production. So the Daily Goody after that was minimizing background noise in your recordings. So minimizing background noise. See, here's one thing about recording audio. Because we see a lot of posts online about, oh, I recorded this audio and it's terrible. There's an air conditioner. There's airplanes going by. There's trucks. There's honking horn. And how do I get rid of all that noise? And the real answer is avoid that. Avoid having to get rid of all that noise. Record it properly. So minimize the background noise. So choosing the right place to record, choosing where to set up your stuff, the direction to point your microphone. Using a dynamic mic instead of a condenser will help with background noise if it's something you need to be really careful about. And then you have to just be aware of and minimize different things like, air ventilation ducts, computer fans, squeaky chairs, and then different stuff outside the house, outside the studio. You have to be aware of where you are and what you're recording and then sort of, minimize each one as much as you can, and then you'll have the quietest recording, which is great. Okay, next one. Using Reaper as my DAW. Yes, I'm using Reaper, and Reaper is one of these programs where most people don't understand how awesome Reaper is and how powerful of a DAW this is. It's unbelievably powerful. It's an amazing DAW. It does like a million things beyond what you think it does. And anyway, there's a post here. There's a link to a post about all the great things about Reaper. And of course, Garth Humphreys loves Reaper. He's a previous guest on this show. And he also loves FLAC files, the FLAC files. And Garth, by the way, I don't know if you're hearing this, but the only reason I said that is because I heard your podcast. I think it's called the Audio Roundtable. Oh, shoot. Am I getting that right now? Yes. It's called the Audio Roundtable, which is Garth's new show, which he co-hosts with 3 others. Listened to one of their episodes recently. He's really good. And anyway, his co-hosts on that show were busting him, making fun of him because of the FLAC files, because he likes FLAC files. So, Garth, I'm with you, man. I love FLAC files too. Wow, my voice just squeaked. All right, next one. Squadcast for recording guests. All right. Well, just go to squadcast.fm, and I think you can try Squadcast for free, but it's a really good voice over IP recording platform, and they recently, a couple months ago, came out of beta, and probably 3 weeks ago, I started using it exclusively because I had a couple problems with Zencastr, so now I'm like, hey, let me try Squadcast. They're out of beta. And so far, everything has worked great, except I did have one problem, which was a very strange problem, and I'm not even going to attempt to explain it because it'll take me too long. But I'm lucky I saw the problem, I heard it, and I saw it, and I was able to fix it. But I think I'm going to have to reach out to the Squadcast guys and tell them what happened. And I'll probably have to get them on the phone to do that because I don't think I can write it in an email. And if I can write it in an email, it's going to take me literally 17 hours to write that email, which I refuse to do. So I don't know how you feel about that. Like, I can't stand when someone, like, they won't get on the phone with me. They'll just be like, oh, no, email me. And I've gotten to the point in my business where, no, I'm not going to email you. We need to talk on the phone. Because I'm telling you, the email would take me an hour and a half to craft. I don't have an hour and a half. I could tell you in 90 seconds what I need to tell you, and you'll understand it. But for me to write out an email and explain everything and provide context for everything, oh my God, it takes forever. I'll type in one line, and then I'll be like, no. And then I'll backspace over it and type again. I don't know. Do you struggle to type emails like that? I do. All right, the next Daily Goody. Optimal separation of multiple microphones in the same room. Okay, so if you have multiple microphones in the same room, how do you make sure there's optimal separation between mics? Because, you want each mic to pick up mostly the person who's speaking into that mic. And you don't want the other people to bleed into that mic. So it's really easy. If you have two microphones, you basically face the microphones away from each other, directly away from each other, if they're cardioid microphones. If you have three mics, point them at 120 degrees away from each other, which is as far as they can get. And if you have four microphones, point them 90 degrees away from each other. So that's, kind of common sense as well. You just want to point the mics as far away, as far in the opposite direction as you can from each other. So, okay, next one. Clean the wax out of your ears from time to time. I don't think I need to comment on that, but I don't know. You've all had the experience where you didn't clean the wax out of your ears for like 2 months, and then you're amazed at what comes out of your ears. So, and I guess it does impact your hearing a little bit, so I don't know. It's good to keep your ears clean. All right, next one. Editing to increase the pace of an episode. Pacing is important to the listener. Like, I'm sure you've listened to many episodes where they're just too slow. And as you're listening, you're sort of wondering, really, what's gonna come next. Imagine listening to an entire, you can't listen to an entire episode like that. So what you can do in editing is you can take out a bunch of the spaces there, or even delete some phrases like, and things like that. And again, there's a lot of things you can do, and we're not going to get into it right now, but the whole point is to speed up the pace of the episode so that the listener doesn't fall asleep. That's one thing. There's even one show I was trying to listen to this one show recently, and it was so slow. The pace was so slow, and it was just one guy talking. Normally there's two guys on this podcast, but this was just like a quick little update episode. It was 20 minutes long, kind of like this one. And he was like, it was excruciating how slow this guy was going, and like I just demonstrated a minute ago. And I literally, I found the website, and they have a contact us page, and I literally typed in a message to these guys and was like, look, I produce podcasts, and I have some thoughts of feedback to give you if you want it. So if you do want it, reach out to me. But you know what? I never sent it because people are going to get upset that I wrote that, and they're going to be like, oh, well, just don't listen then. Or, yes, some people will be interested in the feedback, but I don't know. It's like I wanted to give them feedback, but if you give your feedback and it's unsolicited, like meaning people don't ask you for it, that's like, I don't know if that's ever a good idea. Even when people ask you for feedback, I don't know if it's a good idea to give it. Right? Isn't that weird? All right, this might be the last one. Popular mastering software and plugins. Well, you could check out the post on this because I briefly talk about Isotope Ozone 8, which is definitely something I use. You have Auphonic, right? You can use Auphonic for mastering, and you can also use individual plugins chained together. One of my favorite plugins, my individual plugins for mastering, is the FabFilter Pro MB. It's a multi-band compressor. And anyway, you can use any plugin sort of as a mastering in the mastering step. But again, you kind of have to use it for a reason. And the higher quality the plugin, the better. All right, then the next day was the episode with me and Alan Tepper discussing MP3 versus AAC. All right, so that's where we're going to leave it. I appreciate you listening. I hope all these daily goodies were helpful. And, of course, subscribe to the emails to get them every day and stuff like that. And if you have any questions, like I said, comment on the post and ask your question in a comment on the post, and I'll be able to respond, and everybody will be able to see it and benefit from it. So, all right. Well, thank you for listening. I really appreciate you all. And next week is another awesome episode with a guest. So, all right. We'll talk to you later.